The following program contains adult situations, coarse language, tasteless behavior, disturbing scenes, bad jokes, unnecessary crudeness, full frontal nudity, bodily fluids, violence, sexually explicit behavior, may induce nausea, incontinence, gratuitous sex, oral discomfort, scenes from Baywatch, run-on sentences, assholes behind the glass, drunken genital exposure, and does not reflect the views of the producer, director, off and online editors, light, sound, makeup, graphic design, station network affiliates, maintenance staff, executive offices, any associated business or clergy. No animals were harmed in the making of this show. Viewer discretion is most definitely advised.
What up, Mike? Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto, where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto, where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto, like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1170 of Toronto Mic'd. Proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. StickerU.com. Create custom stickers, labels, tattoos, and decals. Palma Pasta. Fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees. The Yes, We Are Open podcast. A Moneris podcast production. The Advantaged Investor podcast from Raymond James, Canada. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. Ridley Funeral Home. Pillars of the community since 1921. Canna Cabana. The lowest prices on cannabis. Guaranteed. And Sammy Cohn Real Estate. Ask Sammy any real estate questions at sammy.cohn@properlyhomes.ca. In December 2018, Ed Conroy visited to record Christmas crackers, our seasonal tradition. We're actually recording Volume 5 next week. But 4 years ago, we paid tribute to the voice, Mark Dailey. Mark Dailey passed away 12 years ago at the far too young age of 57. Let's listen and remember what a beloved force he was in this city and how much he's missed.
If this year,
Yeah?
everybody came back for Christmas.
Everybody?
What's the problem?
I'll tell you what the problem is. You're not the real Cindy, you're a fake.
I didn't really want to come home for Christmas. Do you think that everything's okay with the kids?
Are you that blind you don't even recognize your own daughter?
Seems like old times, doesn't it, Bob?
It's sure great being home, Mom.
Please don't ask us to start at the beginning.
Here's a story.
This is a very special Christmas.
No, it's not. It's a very Brady Christmas. 8 Sunday on City.
Nobody does it better. Isn't that wonderful?
I like that it's become self-aware. I like it. That was great.
Yeah, well, I guess now is as good a time as any to kick off our tribute to the voice, the one and only Mark Dailey. It's funny when, there's been a lot of memorials this year to, obviously, Roger Ashby. And, people saying there's nobody that's ever going to get an opportunity to do 50 years on radio now. So he's like the last of his kind. And I think the same obviously said about Mark's work in that there's nobody that's ever, I don't care if you're a vlogger or a YouTube star or what, that's ever going to get the opportunity to become the voice of the city of Toronto. So, we should pay our respects.
Well, that does it for Big Tom Rivers. 1971. And Hank O'Neill starts a brand new year next at CKLW. For the last time this year, I will say to you, rock on, mother! Ladies and gentlemen, The beat goes on.
CKLW, the Motor City.
So CKLW. I'm sure you know a bit about that radio station, Mike.
Known as the Big Eight.
The Big Eight, operating out of Windsor. Just to back up a little bit, so Mark Dailey was born in Youngstown, Ohio in 1953, and he was very passionate from a young age about three things: law enforcement, broadcasting, and trucks. He loved trucks. He loved driving trucks. He loved talking about trucks. And when he was a teenager, this is a fascinating story. He worked as a agent of the Tri-County Drug Squad. So often you'll see when you read about Mark Dailey, he was a policeman. He never was actually like a policeman on the beat. He was basically an undercover 21 Jump Street kind of guy. And he was working with the Ohio Police Department. And he gave this great interview in the late 70s where he said basically he gave it up because his friends disowned him, and they're like, you can't do that. And they called him Marco the Narco. And he realized that was going to kill any social life he had. So he got out of it. He remained fascinated by law enforcement and obviously kept close friends with people in law enforcement, but he started to focus on his broadcast career. So he had his inaugural radio stuff was the smaller stations in Ohio. So WYTV, WNIO. But his big break came at CKLW, the Big Eight, which was in Windsor. Now, a little bit about CKLW. We could do a 10-hour show about the historical importance of CKLW. But I don't know if you remember when Weisblot was here a few years ago. You and him and myself did a show about Chum, the Chum Requiem.
Of course.
And Weisblot did a brilliant little bit explaining the format, which was invented by a man named Bill Drake, that was called the Boss Radio or Drake format. And that was basically like produced so tight where you just had jingles and on-air DJs and music, and it was like there was not even a millisecond of dead air. It was, you turned on that station and it grabbed you by the balls, and you never changed the channel, right? It was an incredible format. So the Big Eight used that format. And because they were broadcasting at 50,000 watts, it was an incredibly powerful signal. So even though it's based in Windsor, most of their listeners were in Detroit, but they were also hitting Ohio and parts of New York, parts of Chicago. And there was a person that worked at CKLW by the name of Rosalie Tremblay, and she's famous because she was playing a lot of Motown. So this is in the late 60s. And again, this is a great Canadian story. It doesn't get as much attention as I think it deserves. Everybody knows Motown now. Everybody thinks that, happened organically in America. Of course, those records were being produced in Detroit, but the only stations that were playing them in America were very low frequency, sort of specialized African-American channels. And so nobody was really hearing it outside of scattered geographical areas. So CKLW is playing Gladys Knight. CKLW is playing all of these great Motown records, and people are hearing it in Cleveland and in New York. And Motown blows up basically because of a station in Windsor. So magnificent station. They also had a little bit later this fantastic format of news called 2020. And the 2020 format was 20 minutes after the hour, 20 minutes before the next hour. And it's kind of considered the first tabloid radio news. So it was very salacious, and it was very much focused on the obscene amount of murder and mayhem that was happening in Detroit at the time. And that's where Dailey started, and that's where he honed his craft.
It's 3:40. This is Mark Dailey, CKLW 2020 News. Barring any unforeseen downpours, the freeway should be passable with caution during rush hour. Heavy rains weren't swallowed by drains along the Lodge Freeway especially, causing some high waters, and now street crews are trying to clean off mud and debris in both the north and southbound lanes. Police are urging extreme caution along the Lodge, but all freeways will be open this morning. The High Lake Erie water surfaced another floater off the Gibraltar Marina. Two fishermen hooked the male remains and pulled it ashore. Don Kowalski was working on his boat when the body washed in.
I was down working on my boat and seen this one come in pretty fast, and he had a body tied to
It's a remarkable piece. Anybody interested, check it out. There's a CKLW fan page on Facebook that has a bunch of air checks. And that was from 1973. And if you know Dailey's work, that sounds like it could have been from 93 or 2003. I mean, he had it right from the get-go.
And I love the floater reference.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was very graphic and very film noir is the word that is used about 2020 news.
And Dick Smythe, he's another guy.
Dick
from
Smythe was
2020.
from 2020, absolutely, and of course, because the station was so recognized, it was getting a lot of attention. And the other thing important to note is that Dailey was embedded in Detroit, even though he worked for a Windsor station. He was covering the beat in Detroit, and this is a time when there was 800 homicides a year. Okay. And Dailey would talk about how he'd go on shift, and by the time he'd come off his shift, there had been 8 murders. Right. So he got a real taste of mayhem and murder and gangs and gun violence in Detroit, cut his teeth there. And it's interesting. I don't know, Mike, if you in the future, when you have guests that know a bit more about this, is where it gets a little bit weird for me. I know that in 1974, he gets a call to go work at Chum. Okay, makes perfect sense. We know Tom Rivers was at Chum. Tom Rivers was at CKLW the same time he was there. But at some point around then as well, he worked at Q107, and he was the very first news director of Q107. So I don't know.
Donaby would know, maybe.
Donaby would know for sure. I tried to investigate that. There's nothing online other than the mention of him being the first news director. But we know he became a big deal at Chum. And he also became, obviously in Toronto, he became friends with a man by the name of Glenn Cole. Now, Glenn Cole, you might remember, was the assignment editor at City Pulse on City TV. And Glenn Cole was an ex-Mountie, ex-RCMP. And again, this ties back to Dailey's friendship with the law enforcement community. So he would go hang out and go to bars and go to dinner with cops and RCMP. And that was the kind of people that he liked to hang out with. And so he got to know Glenn Cole, and Glenn Cole said, shit, you got to come and work at City Pulse. You know, Moses wants to reinvent news, the way that news in Toronto is reported. And they already had Jojo Chinto. So they already had, a fantastic sort of beat guy who knew the streets of Toronto, but they were like, you covered Detroit and you got to come to Toronto. So in 1979, he comes to work at City TV.
Police have charged 2 of the men, 39-year-old Ronald Oswald of Scarborough and 38-year-old Nicholas Sekelitis of Walmer Road, with conspiracy and 12 counts of robbery and using firearms. Through witnesses and a bank photograph recently, police had released these composite drawings of the 2 bandits, noted for their aggressive, threatening style. They often mentioned they had come from the swamp, which we took to mean either Vietnam or prison. The swamp gang dried up yesterday around 2 p.m. when 2 men grabbed nearly $3,000 in a robbery of the Bank of Montreal at Leslie and Naimark. The 2 men fled toward a nearby getaway car behind the plaza. Staff Sergeant Frank Craddock was one of 5 hold-up squad officers who met them with pointed shotguns.
In this squad, we are all very professional people, and we know how to handle and deal with these type of situations. And it was a very tense moment, but there was no problems with the arrests, and everything went very well.
Later, police picked up 34-year-old Robert McMillan of Whitmore Avenue and George Zolas, 33, of Scarborough. They're each charged with just several of the 12 stick-ups. Police also seized 2 vehicles. They actually belonged to 2 of the accused. Police note that nobody ever saw the getaway cars because of the threats made by the bandits in the banks. All 4 appeared briefly in provincial court in North York this morning and were remanded in custody. The Swamp Boys stayed in their own neighborhood since last March 19th. They hit about a bank a month, all east of Yonge Street, mostly in Scarborough, with brief appearances in Markham and Pickering. The hold-up squad traditionally clears most of the financial institution robberies every year, and they're well on the road to doing it again. They've cleared up 82% of the cases with arrests and charges this year. In fact, they've cleared up 37 cases in the last 2 weeks, some of those from 1982. Mark Dailey at the Hold Up Squad office, City Pulse.
So, yeah, I mean, so hard-boiled. And he, at the time, he's rocking this fedora. He had his raincoat on. And he was actually, his nickname amongst the Toronto Police Department was the Inspector, because he would show up at these, whether it was a bank robbery or a homicide, and often people that obviously didn't know who he was, because this is still the early days, they thought he was a cop, right? Because he kind of acted and talked like Jack Webb, right? He's like the guy from Dragnet.
For
He's
sure.
just business. So he had this incredible relationship with the police department, and they trusted him. Like, they would tell him stuff, and then they'd say, look, you can't report this. Like, we're not going to tell you this on the record, but that would help in his reportage. And again, this was all very crucial in the early days of City Pulse to give that credibility. So it's like, if you wanted to know about crime in Toronto, you knew Jojo Chinto and Mark Dailey were like the best reporters covering these things.
But not good enough to know if Swamp Boys meant Vietnam or prison.
Well, either one's pretty terrifying, right? Also interesting, around this time, there was a horrible event that happened in Toronto in 1980. You might remember it. There was a police officer by the name of Michael Sweet who was murdered when he took a call. He was just about to go off shift. He got a call that there was a robbery in progress at a bar on Queen Street. So him and his partner went. These two low-life guys, brothers, shot Michael Sweet, and he was still alive, but he was bleeding out, and begging these guys to be let go so he could see his kids. And he died. And Dailey was apparently at his desk on Queen Street 99. And he was the first one on the scene. And there was no other reporters there. And for the rest of his career, he always talked about that night being, the most heinous crime that he had ever seen. And this is a guy that was in Detroit, when 800 people were dying a year. And it's remarkable because I also interviewed Gord Martineau a few years ago, and I asked him, throughout his whole career, what was the hardest story that he ever covered? And he said, without a doubt, it was the murder of Officer Sweet. And, Dailey talked about it always for the rest of his life, and it was just an absolutely horrible thing. And up until then, we were known as Toronto the Good. And a lot of people talk about that night in 1980 as being when we stopped being Toronto the Good. Yeah, it's a tough one. He was the only guy that of all the newscasters in Toronto at the time that had that kind of support and access to the Toronto Police Department. He also started up an organization which is still running called Crime Stoppers. And that was, again, kind of taking the City TV ethos, which was, engage viewers to become part of the story. So, I mean, people call it a snitch line, but the idea of Crime Stoppers was that you might know somebody that's involved in these things. So, call this number and help us catch the bad guys. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you remember when Mark Dailey passed at his funeral, the majority of people speaking were police officers, including the chief at the time. So let's get to a much happier time. 1983. Two incredible things happened to City TV in 1983. Very important, groundbreaking things happened. Number one, they started to say everywhere. Okay. Up until that point, they just used to say that you're watching Toronto television. But they actually started it on City Pulse. They said City Pulse was everywhere. And then not long after, City TV was everywhere. And then number two, the guy who did all the voiceovers on City TV was, nobody can remember his name. I've tried to look him up. He was just, he did his job. He was fine. He went on holiday and they needed somebody to do a voiceover for a movie. And somebody said, why don't you ask Mark to do it? Because he's got this baritone voice. And apparently Dailey said, I'm so busy. I'm doing all this stuff. Get somebody else. He really was not into doing it. And they said, no, come on. So they did a little test. And here's a great, amazing, rare little thing that I found, which was the very first test of Mark Dailey's voiceover skills. So what we're going to hear first is it was for a spot for the movie of the great movie of this particular night, which was The Fall of the House of Usher. And the first part you hear is the regular guy doing the voiceover. And then they got Mark to do the same script, and see if you notice the difference. It's like the Pepsi Taste Test Challenge here.
Tonight at 8, from the mind of Edgar Allan Poe comes this house of horror. the house where the Lord of Darkness reigns and where murder becomes pleasure. Robert Hayes, Charlene Tilton, and Martin Landau, The Fall of the House of Usher, tonight at 8.
Tonight, from the mind of Edgar Allan Poe, comes this house of horror. The house where the Lord of Darkness reigns and where murder becomes pleasure. Robert Hayes, Charlene Tilton, and Martin Landau. The Fall of the House of Usher, tonight on Great Movies.
So yeah, there's a great story that Mark Dailey used to tell about how he got a note from Moses, like from Moses's office, and the headline of the note said, "A Star is Born," because Moses didn't like these guys that were doing the voiceovers before because they were just totally conventional. And it's actually in, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but Joel directed this brilliant 90-minute sort of a dinner/roast when Moses left Chum in 2003. It's called Moses TV, and it's basically all of his friends and coworkers standing up and telling stories about him. And Dailey stands up and says, "I remember the night when, I first went on and I got this telegram from Moses saying a star is born," because that voice represented to Moses that kind of, it was like a disembodied voice that had so much emotion, and it was exactly the kind of stuff that Moses wanted on City TV, but he hadn't been able to get. And again, you got to remember, we're gonna play some more clips, but at this time, they didn't advertise the fact that it was Mark Dailey. Now, eagle-eared viewers that watched City Pulse probably made the connection. Oh yeah, the guy talking about movies is the same guy doing the crime. But the idea was it was meant to be a secret. So here we have a short clip of City Pulse and the trademark everywhere.
City Pulse, everywhere.
And then the station ID from the corner of X and X.
Climbing higher to see the light. This is City TV, everywhere.
And, the everywhere stuff, of course, is to this day the number one thing people remember about City TV. And they still say it. The station retired it however many years ago, but it is forever linked to that station. And I believe that is because at the time it gave City TV this connection to viewers, as Brian so eloquently said from the beginning, that no matter where you were in the city, you would see an ID that would say we're at the corner of Bathurst and Bloor. This is City TV everywhere. We're, wherever, everywhere.
Who retired it? Do you remember when?
Well, Rogers. Rogers retired it not long after Mark Dailey passed away, because I guess they thought it was so linked to him. But I, like many other decisions they made, I don't agree with that. And it's unfortunate. But that being said, I mean, Dailey clearly was having so much fun doing these because he didn't always say everywhere in the same way, right? One of the things that cracks me up about, say, News Talk 1010, I don't know if you hear when they have their reporters.
Oh yeah, Siobhan Morris will go 1010.
News Talk 1010. They say it in these kind of weird ways, which is cool because it registers. But Dailey never said everywhere the same way twice, which, man, he must have done thousands of those, thousands and thousands. And, I'm forever finding new ones. And clearly, as the years went by, he got more and more experimental. Like, they were kind of very standard for the first 10 years. And then you get into the 90s and they kind of go crazy. But, clearly we're still in sort of mid 80s here. And Dailey becomes the de facto voice of not only City TV, the programming, but also he starts doing commercials. And, one of the things that I remember being so funny about the 80s was you'd see a movie commercial like, Nightmare on Elm Street coming to the Eaton Center. But then it would be the American commercial. But then at the very end, it would be like Dave Duvall or, somebody from the channel that was airing it that would be like, now playing at a theater near you.
Right.
So, of course, Dailey does it. It's like a depth charge.
Come on and roll, roll, roll. Come out to where the fun times roll. Roll, roll, roll. Anytime is a great time to go.
It's time to come out of the cold and into Bolorama, where you're always assured of a warm welcome, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So this winter, meet your friends at Bolorama. For reservations, call U-Bowl.
That was for Mark Weisblatt, by the way. He loves those things.
So what's the story on Bolorama? The final location is shut down? Or?
The Bathurst one, yeah. And again, I think Mark and I communicate about this quite a bit because it's like a real end of an era, but it's not really being recognized as such. For some odd reason.
Yeah, it was just last year. I think it was last year or 2 years ago. It's all, again, I'm having trouble with whether it was a year ago or 2 years ago. It's just like the age of your youngest. But there was a Dundas Street location that I used to go to all the time that shut down, and now there's, I don't know, condos being built there. But yeah, the Bathurst location, I think it just closed its doors last week, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad. I think bowling is a casualty of devices and short attention spans, and it's just not the thing that we all used to go and do to kill time.
And it takes up a lot of space, I think.
Yes,
it's sort of like a golf course. Like, hey, that's a lot of space. We could,
Totally. I think we had it now playing in there.
Oh yeah, here's it now playing, of course.
Now playing at a theater near you. Consult local listings.
It's funny too because you know the levels that the commercial play at are low, and then it's like Dailey's thing comes on and it blows the speakers.
Well, that's it. I'm on my toes this episode because I have to. And if I have that, like, I give myself 2 seconds to adapt. Is this going to be one of those quiet ones I got to jack up, or one of those screaming? Somebody's listening now, like on a jog or something. They're having a heart attack.
It's like a screamer video on YouTube. So this next one I love, and I'll tell you a funny story, is that this was the clip that when Mark passed away, City TV, to Roger's credit, they did a wonderful memorial about him, and they showed it that night on City Pulse, and they left it on the website for years and years afterwards. It's not there anymore, but it was there for a long time. And they took clips off of my YouTube channel, which was awesome. I was so happy that they did that because, again, nobody there at the time would have known where to find any of this stuff. And of course,
but think about that for a moment. Okay, so you're archiving the history of this station, and then when they want to, share old clips, they don't go into their own like library or whatever. They go to you, who spent all that, like, for love of the game. You've spent all that time archiving the clips, and they play your YouTube clips from. Yeah, that's sort of bizarre.
No, I was so thrilled because I thought this was a really good Polaroid of when Mark started to get kind of playful with his voiceovers, and I'm sure I don't know if it was the last time or 2 trips ago here, we talked about the Bob Segarini story with the cats, and he was the host of Late Great Movies, and he got fired, and so Dailey took over. Obviously he's hosting it as a voice, but he did these intros, and that's when he really was let loose, because Great Movies was on in prime time. He had to be somewhat conventional, but once you got past midnight and you're showing B movies, Porky's and the like, he had much more license to be funny.
Blue Lagoon.
Exactly. Or the Daryl Hannah Grease movie, I forget what that was called, but yeah, a lot of movies we watched as teenagers. But this little clip that we're going to hear next is just so perfect. It's a classic Mark.
Stay with City TV as we take you away from all this regular programming stuff to show you what television really can be. Oh, I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong copy. Late Great Movies are next. From the City Pulse newsroom, this is Toronto Television. City TV, everywhere. You're about to enter the vast world of late great movies. Big deal, right? Tonight we're repeating a movie we had about a month ago because we feel like it, and I like it. Audie Murphy stars. Remember him? In Showdown.
But Ed, this was the character that drew me to that made this my station.
Totally. And it's funny, Moses has a fantastic quote that I just found recently where he talks about back then people chose their television station. It was almost like a fashion statement, right? It's like some people choose to wear Club Monaco because it says something about them. People chose to watch City TV. It was like a statement almost. Like I watch City Pulse News. I don't watch CBC News, And I think for sure that character that Mark embodied, that irreverent wit and humor of making fun of these things that were ludicrous, right? But when they show a shitty movie on CBC, they act like it's a great movie, right? So it was so refreshing. And I think tons of people were watching it just to hear him make fun of the movies, right?
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, I mentioned many times, I spend a ludicrous amount of time going through these old home recorded VHS and beta tapes that thankfully survived the years. People kept them and now they donate them to Retrontario. And I love, even though I've got a million of them, to find another great movies intro with Mark Dailey saying stuff like that. It's still a buzz. And now we get to the part of the story where it's really interesting because it's now the 80s, mid 80s, and Chum City is starting to create new channels, and obviously
But I think I might have one more trailer. I think I have one more in the queue.
Oh yes, how could I forget these?
Before you get there,
yes, let's play those other movie trailers.
Well, my little cousin.
Tonight on Pervert Playhouse.
You say you're from St. Alphonse and you claim to be my cousin. I'm sorry, I don't remember you at all. Who are you?
He's a smelly old man with a dirty little plan.
I don't trust him.
I wouldn't either after what he did to Buffy last night.
Oh, can you imagine? A mother waiting night after night.
Well, I bet that's not the only pipe getting smoked around here. Hey, Buffy?
I believe someday you will be a phone.
Kissing Cousin, tonight on Pervert Playhouse.
Everything seems completely different to me today.
Tonight on City, Wank Week continues with another chicken choking classic.
A movie?
He's on a double date with the Palm Sisters.
A lot of things about me you don't know anything about. Things you wouldn't understand.
Stand up!
Best like the whole world. Congratulations to you too.
Pocket Pool Pee Wee, brought to you by Handy Wipes, tonight on City.
Where's Jessica?
Sunday, all's well that ends in the well for poor Southern trash.
Help me! Get her now!
And every asshole and his dog shows up.
The world's attention is riveted on the fate of a brave little girl stuck in an abandoned 8-inch water well.
At least the little tramp had a well. When I was her age, I would have given my left nut for any type of hole to play in.
Please don't let my baby die.
Why? You've got your mind set on a sequel? Everybody's meal ticket Sunday.
Tubby little
Tonight, he's a pussy-chasing, dry-humping hound of love.
We don't want any kind of dog. We want Benji. You leave my sweetie Petey alone.
Benji finds a girlfriend. They go out for a few drinks. Then he takes the bitch home, where they do it doggy style.
Hold it.
Sex police.
Oh, shoot.
Will Benji be neutered?
What's that? It's a dog.
Benji!
Fuck you, I'm chasing tail. Quit fucking the dog. You can't lick Benji. That's his job. A family classic tonight.
I caught on though the well one, and I'm like the tramp and and I'm like, no, these are not real.
No, those of course were for the Christmas party. Just so good. Obviously better with the visuals too, but you get the idea.
Wank
very
Week.
Subversive. Wank Week continues here on City TV. Yeah, so we all know and love the movie voiceover stuff, the City Pulse stuff. The next clip, it's a little bit of not a little bit of a point of contention, but, I loved Christopher Ward's book about Much Music. I think it's brilliant. It's absolutely the most brilliant book about that point in time. However, it does not mention Mark Dailey once. And I thought that was a terrible oversight, but it's an understandable oversight because I guess the people that were working on air at Much Music, they didn't think about the promos. And as a viewer, when Much Music started, it was a pay TV channel. It wasn't on basic cable. So all I remember of Much Music in the early days was seeing commercials for it that were voiced by Mark Dailey.
Hear much music, coast to coast across Canada, in stereo, 24 hours a day. Top music videos and much more. Rock news, contests, concerts, specials. Coming to you every day of the week is everything you need. Much music for less than the price of an album. It's yours. Much music. All music all the time on the nation's music station. Much music. Get yours now.
You know, that made me want to buy Much Music, just his enthusiasm. Yeah, and it, you know, as years go on, Much Music is no longer pay. It's on basic. He's still doing all of the promos. And, you know, as a fellow hip hop fan, I'm sure it was always funny to hear him talk about Shabba Ranks and Big Daddy Kane and people like that.
This Christmas, we've got the perfect gift idea to give or receive. 3 months of Much Music, the nation's music station. And the official Much Music sweatshirt, all for only $24.95. Get 3 months of concerts, contests, rock news, and the best video music in the country, live every day in stereo. This Christmas, give Much and the official Much Music sweatshirt, all for just $24.95. Call your local cable company for details.
Can I tell the people you're wearing a City TV sweatshirt? I'm
repping a City TV sweatshirt that I created with as a collaboration with a great guy called The Store. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's kind of like I call him the Banksy of renegade T-shirt designers in Toronto because nobody knows who he is. I collaborated with him, but I never met him in person. I don't even know what his name is. But he creates these T-shirts out of vintage brands. So he did like a Becker's shirt, and he did a, Byway shirt, and all this kind of stuff. And he reached out to me. I've said, I love what you do, and would you like to collaborate on something? And we threw around some ideas. We said, let's do a City TV shirt. My only caveat was, let's do a Channel 79 City TV shirt as opposed to a 57.
Right.
But yeah, I figured I'm repping the station. I gotta.
But you got the Everywhere in the arms, but Everywhere doesn't debut until it doesn't. You don't hear Everywhere on 79.
You did, yes, because 79 did not become 57 until fall of '83. So there was about 6 months of Everywhere on 79.
Oh, I thought I had you there.
No, come on.
Okay, I got to wake up really early in the morning to get you. That's great. Anyways, we'll have a photo together afterwards and let people see the. So he's like, I never even knew about this guy.
Yeah, so he's kind of an Instagram guy. I think that's his only social presence. And he does runs. They're limited, so there's only like 50 of each shirt. And he'll announce, I'm here on Sunday, and it's like first come, first serve. But absolutely, he did a consumers distributing like hoodie, but just cool shit.
How have I never heard of this guy? Like, I feel ignorant.
No, I mean, look, it's underground. It's for the kids, right? Because the kids are like,
that's it. They don't tell me, and I'm too old for that. But really, for the kids, just consumers distributing.
Yeah, because it's like
for me,
crazy old shit, Video 99.
It's like the kids buy it like to be like irrelevant or like to be irreverent, like it's like ironic or something, and then we buy it for nostalgia
because we're like, I want to wrap a Byway shirt.
That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're still talking Much Music. I think we have a clip of him
we got
saying
another
some
one.
funny names.
Here we go.
Coming up on Much. Saturday, Master T and Roxy kick it into full effect on your one and only weekend dance fix, Extend-A Mix. And on Soul in the City, Michael Williams shares the floor with the irrepressible Johnny Gill.
I'm gonna hit the floor. No kids in the candy store.
Later, Roxy Music give you more than this when they're featured in the spotlight.
More than this.
Then catch live coverage via satellite from Ottawa with Steve, Erica, Ziggy, and Master T as they try to make much out of the events leading up to the choosing of a leader at the Federal Conservative Leadership Convention. Take me to your leader.
Put some new provisions in place and move ahead.
See, we talked about this last time, but where else were you getting Master T Extendamix, and then politics. You know, it's so great.
Was that Denise Donlan's doing? Was she a big?
I think she was a big part of that for sure. But it also fit into
Sure.
Moses' idea that music was just a part of life, and you had to focus on the important things like politics. And you could make politics interesting by having Ed the Sock or Master T go and interview people that wanted to be prime minister.
Let me share with everybody that I received a note from Master T just last week, and he says he's definitely coming on in early 2019.
Nice.
So, Master T, you can hook me up with some good audio for that episode.
Buddy.
That'll be fun.
So we're now in full. Everybody knows Mark Dailey's The Voice. He actually starts to get credited on the show. So, when Speaker's Corner would end and the credits would roll, the very first credit would say The Voice Mark Dailey.
Well, Toronto, that's all for this week's show. Remember, talk is deep, so come on down to 299 Queen Street West. Drop in a loonie and speak your mind. You could win great prizes, and all money goes to charity. Until next week, I'm Mark Dailey.
Always love that jazzy theme song.
I love this show. Like, I would watch on the weekends. I'd watch Speaker's Corner, and I would go over to Queen and John and stick a loony and try to get on Speaker's
Did you ever
Corner.
get on?
No, I never got on.
That
Never.
that you know of.
Oh, that I know of.
Could've-
Right.
Now, do you remember who gave out the prizes on Speaker's Corner?
I'm going to guess it was Q107's own Jennifer
Valentine. Yeah,
right.
good man, of course. Speaker's Corner, my God, what an institution. Another thing that everybody still talks about, that why did they get rid of it? There's never been a good answer.
And did Rogers get rid of that too?
Oh, yeah. And their excuse was that of course, they had to move out of 299, but can you imagine if they'd put one at Yonge Dundas Square? What kind of entertainment we'd be looking at?
Is it possible, like, and again, I'm equally in love and hate with Bell Rogers. I don't have any affiliation at all. But because it was a Moses thing, they kind of wanted to sanitize it a bit and maybe just is there anything there that there's some things these are Moses things and we need to lose the past to stamp our own identity on this station we've
I don't think so, because Moses left Chum City in 2003 and
That's right.
Rogers didn't acquire them until almost 5 years after that, right? It still ran after Moses left. I think, to be honest with you, it's a mundane reason. It was money. I mean, it was just another line item that the bean counters are like, why do we need this? People have the internet now. YouTube was active, blogs were active, and they thought nobody gives a shit about this kind of stuff anymore. But I don't believe that for 1 minute.
It was a differentiator. Like, what was the difference between City TV and CTV? Well, these things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The nuances, absolutely.
Right. I'm still mad that they canceled Silverman Helps, okay?
Oh, well, it's funny, Mike, because when I was researching Speaker's Corner, there's a brilliant article floating around that was written by Rob Salem, another amazing guy. I don't know if he's ever been on here.
No, I should get him on.
You should
though.
get him on.
Absolutely.
He knows a lot of cool stuff. He wrote an article basically saying, I can't believe that Rogers canceled Speaker's Corner. And then at the end of the article, he's like, if you weren't angry enough, they also just canceled Silverman.
Yeah.
So Silverman and Speaker's Corner both were axed at the exact same time.
And around that time, I think maybe Ed's Night Party or something, like a lot of these kind of cool things kind of got it at the same
For sure.
time period.
For sure.
Oh.
Now, the next clip is another great thing that Rogers killed, which was the New Year's Eve party at Nathan Phillips Square. I don't know if you ever went to one of those.
Watched it on TV many times, though.
Right. It was just a great thing to have on.
Rock and Ronnie would have the fur jacket, the fur coat on.
And he looked exactly the same, right?
Yeah,
Every
for
year.
sure.
But yeah, I went once and I don't think I had a very good time, but it was just it was a cool thing that you'd have on the TV on New Year's Eve if you were at a party or something. And I think too, it made rock stars out of a lot of these City TV Much Music hosts, because Gordon Martineau or Mark Dailey would go on the stage and it'd be like thousands of people screaming. That must have been a real buzz for them, I'm sure. To go from the studio to that kind of environment.
It's the biggest, it's the best. It's the only New Year's Eve bash you'll want to be at this year, when City TV brings you live performances by Cassandra Bassick, TBTBT, and John James and the Mothers of Hope. Gord Martineau and Monica Diol host as the City of Toronto, Golden Griddle, and City TV present the 9th annual traditional New Year's Eve bash. Be there.
Yeah, some of the bands didn't age very well, I guess. But,
TBTBT. I seem to remember that, like one-hit wonders, I think.
It rings a musty
bit
bell.
of a bell.
And then, we're now in the late 90s, and there's this massive explosion of digital specialty channels, which, of course, Moses and Chum City had more channels than you could believe. They were theme channels, niche channels. CP24 was known as Cable Pulse 24. And as you remember, it was the City Pulse gang doing it 24 hours a day. And, everybody knows CP24 now, but it ain't what it was when it started.
CP24, Greater Toronto's #1 news channel, can now be your first pick. Make us your default station on your digital cable box. Just simply hit the setting button twice on your remote. Follow the instructions on the general settings screen. Scroll to Viewer, Power On. When the list of channels appears, simply highlight 24 and accept. Be in the know instantly. Whenever you push the On button. Easy access to the GTA's #1 news channel, CP24.
It's that simple, man.
Not complicated at all.
I think there's a Simpsons bit where they it's that easy, and it's a bunch of convoluted instructions, and I feel like that was satire.
If I had my consumers distributing watch that could set my VCR time.
Casio.
But yeah, I don't know if you remember it, Mike. I was at uni at the time, but I definitely remember there being a buzz about all these new channels. Because, growing up, it was always, everybody knew somebody who had a satellite or whose uncle had a satellite, and they got all these funky channels. But suddenly in Toronto, we had all these channels. Another great one, when it started, was amazing. That was a Chum City channel, was the Space Channel. And the Space Channel was called the Imagination Station. And it was a Moses original because he was like, we're going to show the science fiction shit like Star Trek and all that, but we're really going to focus on science fact. So they had tons of great, documentaries about science and about the future and time travel. And they took it seriously. Now it's just a dumping ground for junk. But yeah, Mark Dailey was repping space in the early days.
The Daleks are masters of Earth.
It's television's longest-running science fiction series.
Man to them is just a work machine.
Where are you from? Famous for its infinite flexibility.
You'll never control the Cybermen.
I am the leader now.
You will be exterminated.
Shall I fire, Commander? Doctor Who. Weekdays on Space. The Imagination Station.
You know that reaction you had to Blinky? That's my Doctor Who. It's my Doctor Who story because it came on TV Ontario.
Right after Polka Dot Door.
And it would seriously traumatize me. And even hearing it now, I have this guttural reaction where I don't like it.
Yeah, it's weird. Right? The British people that made Doctor Who, especially the people who did the sound, the monster voices and stuff, they were on a next level, man. They did some weird stuff. Now, we'd be remiss when we're talking about science fiction to not celebrate Mark Dailey's tremendous contribution to Star Trek. Of course, City TV showed Star Trek: The Next Generation and all the other shows in the 90s. And he used to have a special name for City TV when he would promote Star Trek.
It is my moral duty to protect mankind from whatever devious plan you have in mind.
Saturday, City proudly presents the season premiere of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
History has to fulfill itself.
I'm going back to the 19th century to get the captain.
Do you know me?
Very well. If we can get back there and destroy that site, it might put an end to that time traveling.
Power up the photons, Mr. Worf.
Data's fate awaits him in the season premiere of Star Trek: The Next Generation, Saturday at 7 on your Federation station.
Yo, Federation Station.
Perfect.
And of course, they showed the last episode of Star Trek TNG at the Sky Dome. And they had all their personalities, including your friends Humble and Fred, dressed up in Star Trek costumes.
Oh, yeah.
And Monica Diol was dressed up like Deanna Troi.
Oh, Monica.
Wow. I'm never going to forget that night.
No, I do remember, maybe it's you actually sharing footage of this on YouTube
Yeah.
and revisiting it and like, did this really happen? But yeah, it happened.
It was a crazy, like a Lollapalooza for nerds.
The other one I always remember is the Cheers finale.
Okay, there's.
But do you remember?
No, we're getting into the
no, but
Mandela
do you remember the
effect
whole like?
now.
Okay. Well, you're the authority. I'm listening. I listen closely. But I remember a station, whatever station broadcast that show. I don't know if it's Global or whatever. You'll remind me. But didn't they have a public viewing of this in like a Sky Dome type of facility?
Well,
Tell me,
no, I'm glad you
Mandela
brought
effect.
this up because this is a bit Mandela effect. I've had many people over the years contact me about that exact subject because I've written about the Star Trek Skydome thing. But I've had people claim that the Cheers finale was shown in Skydome and that the Seinfeld finale was shown at Skydome. I can't find evidence of
The
either.
Seinfeld, I don't remember. I would remember that because I watched Seinfeld. But Cheers, there was something.
Yeah, no,
what was it?
Dude, a lot of people think that. But I invite your listeners, if somebody was there, but I think maybe it happened and then somehow it was undone in the past. You know of the Mandela effect, right? You know this.
Yeah,
idea
is this the Berenstain Bears thing? Or
Yes, Berenstain Bears is
right.
part of it. It's this idea that there's people time traveling and messing with the timelines, Back to the Future style, but it's only
But the
affecting.
Berenstain Bears example is stupid. Okay, it's always been
it's the
spelled. Yes, but I
weakest
totally.
one.
You're right, and I think that there's a lot of people. For example, if I remember this correctly, they remember a Sinbad movie about a genie or something. But it's basically there was a movie with Shaq as a genie, and then people are like, slightly misremembering. So you're right. Maybe there was never a Cheers public viewing, as I recall, and maybe I've taken the Star Trek Next Generation memory, which is real, and somehow it got its lines crossed.
Well, it's super weird because and all of the Mandela effect examples are weird because it's not just one person. Like you could forgive one person for saying, "I'm pretty sure this thing happened," but when you have large groups of people that swear down Berenstain Bears was spelled a certain way, or that the Sinbad movie was at their Blockbuster, it is a little weird. I'm not willing to just write that off and say that's bullshit.
And I
it's
believe
interesting.
The origin of the term is because a bunch of people remember Nelson Mandela
dying in prison, which is a weird thing.
Which is strange because, that did not happen.
No.
Very interesting.
Well, we're still on the topic of interesting science and time travel and whatnot. Tour of the Universe, the groundbreaking ride that was at the base of the CN Tower, that was of the vision of Moses Neimer. Of course, he gets Mark Dailey to do the voiceover on the commercials.
This is the Central Scrutinizer announcing the world's newest travel opportunity, Tour of the Universe. Blast off from the new spaceport at the base of the CN Tower. Participate in the wonder and excitement of a shuttle trip to the solar system.
Round trip regularly $7. Now only $4 for adults, $2.50 for smaller Earthlings. Call CP Interplanetary at 363-TOUR now.
That's dirt cheap, man.
I know. And what did you ever go on it?
Yeah, I do remember going on this.
It's lasted me a lifetime of memories for $2 or whatever.
But even back then, that's sounds like a good deal to me.
It was. No, it was. And unfortunately, I think that's what killed it was because it was only one simulator. They could only fit like 40 people on at one time. If you go to Disney World, you go on the Star Wars version, and it's the same people that built the Star Wars one that built the tour one. They've got like 10 of them going at the same time, so the economics make sense. But Tour of the Universe, man.
How long was it there?
It was there from 86 to 92. So a fair chunk of time. By the end, you see, what's sad to me is I went probably in 86 or 87.
Yeah, me too.
By the end, they actually had actors in costumes like aliens and space police. And they actually were doing like scripted interactions where there would be a storyline going on, like an alien smuggler was trying to escape. And it all tied into this Moses idea of the living movie, which was that you paid your money to go on the ride, but you also were in the middle of basically a movie that was unfolding. And he also had a play at the same time called Tamara. And in the play, you went to a house and people in the play where actors were going into different rooms and you'd follow certain actors around. It was an absolutely amazing concept. Obviously, we go into great detail on his biographical website about the living movie, and you can read lots more about that when we go live.
Hey, this Moses project you've been working on, how often do you get FaceTime with Moses?
I see him on the reg. It's always incredibly humbling, and I'm always kind of like pinching myself that I'm actually sitting in his office and I'm saying things and he's laughing. It's surreal, but it's great. And I think he likes what I do for him. So
he should like what you do for him because you do great work, and he should come on Toronto Mike. And you know what? Tell him, if to make him comfortable, tell him you'll be there beside him. You can both sit there, and I can bring Ziggy in too if you want.
Well, that would be more useful than me being here. For sure.
I've got the extra mic. See, this is 4th mic now.
Oh yeah,
so you can do it all.
You decked out in here. So we're getting, we're now into the late 90s, and here's my personal connection with Mark Dailey. When I graduated from college or from university, I had aspirations of being a filmmaker. I wanted to go make movies. And of course, it's a tough racket. And I was actually working for the OPP, because the OPP would make these short films about certain subjects, and I got this one about gambling addiction, and it was so hard to write. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, was research gambling addiction, and it was so depressing and it fucked up, and I had no understanding of it. And it's funny, I think your best episode of this year, of course, was Peter Gross. And I came away from that episode with a much better understanding of it, but it was something that was so alien to me. And so writing the script, and we had this older British lady who was basically going to be the voiceover for this 20-minute documentary about gambling addiction. And it was like the driest, shitty, boring thing. And then I'm sitting with the people at the OPP. They're agreeing that it's not working. And they said, well, we could get somebody else to do the voice. What about Mark Dailey? And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you can get Mark Dailey? Like, yeah, Mark Dailey. I mean, he's a friend of the OPP. He does all of our like car chase documentaries and all. So holy shit. I went back and I started rewriting the script, because I'm like, I want Mark Dailey to say, these lines that I'm writing. It became this, it suddenly, like, the project became a lot more
punches it up, right?
It punched it right up. And I took great pleasure in putting in my friends' names and all this so we could hear Mark Dailey say it. Now, I threatened to put this garbage online. I haven't yet. It's kind of embarrassing, but here's a little clip from it. This was done as a scene about how gambling addiction can spiral out of control. And these were all names and pictures of my friends and my brother.
This is Pete. He owes Dutchie $100. He doesn't have the money, so he borrows $100 from Paul with some interest. Now he owes Paul $130, and he still doesn't have any money because he's gambled that all away. So he borrows $150 from Trav, again with some interest. After another losing night, Pete now owes Trav almost $200. What will he do? When will he stop?
So, I got to work with Mark Dailey.
Wow. And you got to direct him personally.
No, it was, I faxed him a script.
Okay.
And then he sent me a little digital audio tape, and then we synced it up to the visuals. But I spoke to him on the phone. I went for a coffee with him, and he was just the most lovely man. Like everybody says, he was just the nicest guy. No vibes at all and I'm sitting there going, I'm so sorry to bother you with this garbage. Like, this sucks. This is a waste of your time. But he was this guy that was so involved in policing and law enforcement, and he said, no, this is gambling addiction is a very serious problem. And Mike, to tie this back to what we were saying earlier about the issues of policing in the 21st century, Mark, because of his experience in Detroit and seeing all of that horrible stuff up close, he really believed that it was very important for the public to have a good relationship with law enforcement. And if he could be a bridge, because he did have that local celebrity, he was more than happy to do that. And he didn't even get paid to do this. That's what was so crazy.
Wow.
He did it as a volunteer.
Now, we're winding down here, although these next couple of clips are pretty epic. But I should let you know that when I was promoting that this was happening, that, Ed Retrontario Conroy was coming over, and we were going to do a Mark Dailey tribute, if you will, retrospective. I started hearing, these people would like the tweet and stuff, and I saw these interesting people like, Ziggy thought it was tremendous, and then Cynthia Mulligan was liking the tweet, and a whole bunch of people who worked with the man were just so delighted to hear this was happening, because it's true. Everybody who seemed to come into contact with Mark Dailey left with warm, positive feelings about the man. Like, everybody kind of loved the guy.
And that is so rare in this industry, where people are, backstabbing, and there's all kinds of drama, and there's all kinds of bullshit. This was an old school, like a Jack Webb, like a Dragnet guy. He had it. He knew how to use it. The funniest shit about him is how he would mess with the young guys coming in, the new journalists, and he would sort of make up stories, and he would push it to see at what point would somebody say, did that really happen? Like, come on, dude. So I love that he had this incredible sense of humor. I know you have people on here all the time,
and Romer,
people that worked with him, and I love that you ask them about stories of him, because I think it's very important that we continue to celebrate his contribution, because clearly it touched so many people's lives.
Absolutely. And I will continue to ask that question. I promise you that.
Nice.
Did you want to, you have a Ripping Friends coming
Yeah.
up?
So, this was always funny too. We get into the early 2000s, and Mark Dailey, in addition to voicing all of these channels and all of this extracurricular police stuff, he actually becomes a voice talent for cartoons. And he does a ton of stuff for Nelvana, who's kind of like our Walt Disney. So he's like a voice on Beyblade and Stormhawks and Metabots and all this crazy shit that, unless you had a kid at that time, or you were a kid at the time, is probably meaningless. But there's this show called Ripping Friends, which, I mean, you watched it with your kids.
I watched it with my oldest.
The whole thing was just fart jokes all the time. But we have this little clip to give you a sense of his voice work as a cartoon guy.
I know how to defeat Stinky Butt.
How, man? How?
The secret lies in this can of beans.
Enough of the riddles, man. Spit it out.
Easy, fella. While we were fighting, I planted a miniature camera on Stinky Butt, and I've been watching him in his lair. The reason he didn't finish us off was he couldn't. He ran out of gas. Stinky Butt needs fuel in order to feed his unholy arsenal. This is where he gets his power. See where this is headed?
Yeah, go on, Craig. I'm with you.
Crazy show.
I remember watching. In fact, I wrote about it because I was so excited that Mark Dailey was on the darn show. I think I wrote James and I are Ripping Friends. It's like an entry I wrote on TorontoMike.com way back when. But yeah, I watched that show.
It's remarkable, and I think too it was. When he passed, it was just such a shock, because he had gone through treatment before, and he'd done a segment about it for the City Pulse News, and then he announced, I think it was in September of 2010, that it had come back, and he was taking some time off, and then the news broke 3 months later that he was gone, and I think the whole city was just absolutely in shock, because he was so young and he was so ubiquitous in all of our lives. And, I don't think, as I said earlier, that we'll ever have a character quite like that, that does have such an effect, where I guarantee you, if you went out onto Lakeshore right now and stopped 10 people, probably 8 of them would know exactly who you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How old was he when he passed?
He was 57.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. So yeah, I think now is probably a good time, speaking of Mandela effect, to get into the conspiracy theory about Mark Dailey and his involvement in a certain Rush song. Maybe we should set it up before we play it so people know what to look out for. The song is called Subdivisions. It's from 1982, I believe. It's a brilliant song, an absolutely brilliant video.
One of the first videos I remember.
Totally. And I think revisiting that video now, it really captures that kind of weird early 80s gray, overcast, hanging out in video arcades, everybody smoking butts, everything being kind of dirty. It really captures that vibe, the song in the video. But I always, when I would hear that song, you hear Mark Dailey saying subdivisions. Okay? I just thought that's what it was. It always seemed like that's what it was. And then the internet comes along and people start arguing and saying, no, it's not him. And he would say that he got asked about it all the time. And he would say, no, it's not me. It's Neil Peart. Or the story was always changing. It was somebody else. It was somebody else. But let's play it out. It doesn't start popping in until I think past a minute. But let's see what your listeners think.
And I'm 100% sure that's Mark
Totally.
Dailey.
It totally is. Totally is.
And it comes back later, so I'll just bring it down and we'll chat a bit about this. And maybe if you hear it's coming in like 5 seconds, wave at me, okay? And I'll bring it back up. Okay.
Well, funnily enough, there is a guy called Scott Simpson, I think. He has a blog. And a long time ago, he actually met Mark Dailey and asked Mark Dailey to say subdivisions into his recorder.
Right.
And he did all this like full-on, JFK back into the left, Zapruder footage style analysis. And he proved definitively that it is Mark Dailey.
But my ears, I don't even need his analysis.
I know.
I mean, I can hear it. There's no one else with that timbre, that, and why wouldn't it be him?
So that's where it gets interesting, and I'll tell you my pet theory. I think we can drop it down. I mean, it's.
I know. I feel
it's
like
on
now
YouTube.
What do you mean? There's a YouTube out there? This is the definitive. Okay, I can bring it down, but I'll bring it down nice and low so it doesn't. But let me hear you.
Yeah, I mean, my theory on this is that music rights and publishing rights is a swamp. Okay, talking about Vietnam or prison. And I don't know what exactly happened if they made an arrangement. I don't think for a moment that Mark Dailey went into a recording studio and said subdivisions. I think it was sampled from an episode of City Pulse, because this is early 80s, is right around the time that really the cost of sort of kit samplers really came down. And Rush used samplers a lot. They'd sample, a drum or a certain thing. And people were sampling television, right? They would record a movie and they'd take a sample from a movie and they'd use it in songs. And the interesting thing about City Pulse back then is it would air, there'd be the 7 o'clock, the 10 o'clock, but then it would be that night's episode would be repeated the following day in the morning. So if Rush is sitting around and they've got a song and it's in, gestation, and they want to call it Subdivisions, and holy shit, the crime reporter just said Subdivisions, we got to get that on tape and sample it. They would have known to record it the next day. And you see, this is all before Bismarcky and the whole Paul's Boutique, all the issues about copyright clearance. So I think they sampled it illegally, didn't get any kind of sign off from Dailey. Whether he would have known it was him, but he was such a playful guy, he denied it. He said it was multiple people over the years, but 100% it's him.
It reminds me a little bit about, so I was a big Maestro, I still am, a Maestro Fresh West fan, and his second album, Black Tie Affair, I think it was called.
Yep.
There's a song on that album in which there's a sample of like a Much Music piece that has Michael Williams in it. I think he's talking about Maestro or whatever. And uncredited or again, not cleared at all. And I remember watching Much Music one day and Michael Williams referenced this and said it would have been nice. It would have been nice to have been asked or something that. So that was the thing to do, man. You sample some.
It was the
some
Wild
Moses
West
property.
Wild West,
wow.
and it's so like. We played those clips earlier of Mark Dailey's delivery when he was reporting on crime stories, and subdivisions is a word you wouldn't think. You and I aren't going to be saying a word like that, but a guy covering crime.
Yes, and it does
Toronto.
now that you say that, and I'm so glad that you said that because now it does sound like it's part of a news story that he's reading
for sure.
City
for
Pulse,
sure.
Man.
So maybe at some point Getty will come out and just say, "Okay, Jesus, you got us. We sampled him."
When Getty comes on Toronto Mic'd, I'm going to just look him in the eyes and say, is that Mark Dailey, yes or no? He's going to tell me the truth, real talk. I'm going to get the answer here. Man, I miss Mark Dailey, and sadly, like you said, we lost him 8 years ago. But that was a tremendous retrospective and tribute to the man. Well done.
Thank you so much, so graciously for allowing me to come on here and for us to enjoy and your listeners to enjoy this incredible body of work that we keep uncovering, and there's lots more to come.
And that brings us to the end of our 1170th show. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Toronto Mike. Ed Conroy is at Retrontario. Our friends at Great Lakes Brewery are at Great Lakes Beer. Palma Pasta is at Palma Pasta. Sticker U is at Sticker U. Maneris is at Maneris. Raymond James Canada are at Raymond James CDN. Recycle My Electronics are at EPRA_Canada. Ridley Funeral Home are at Ridley FH. Canna Cabana are at Canna Cabana _. And Sammy Cohn Real Estate is at Sammy Cohn. Cohn is KOHN. See you all Friday.
It's been 8 years of laughter and 8 years of tears. And I don't know what the future can hold or will do for me and you. But I'm a much better man for having known you. Oh, you know that's true because everything is coming up rosy and green. Yeah, the wind is cold. play this guitar just the best that I can. Maybe I'm not and maybe I am. Who gives a damn, because everything is coming up rosy and green. Yeah, the wind is cold, but the smell of snow warms me today. And your smile is fine and it's just like mine.